Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and today we're going to talk about a book that isn't very good, but I like it anyways. So, periodically I go through periods where I don't even really think about the channel. Usually this happens when I get a backlog of books together such that I'm not going to have to read anything for the channel for a couple of weeks. And I can just read whatever without even having to think about whether this is a book I want to do for the channel. This time I stumbled across Kerrelyn Sparks, and this is not actually the book that I stumbled across first and read halfway through before sort of clicking in my head that that's later in the series and I should probably at least try to read the first one. So this is first in a new series, thus the first book, and this is a really odd read. It's entertaining, but it feels odd. It's not quite as overwrought as the second book, which I'm sort of still in the middle of and will have finished by the time next week's video goes up. But this book is, how do I describe these? This is an incredibly tropey, high fantasy sort of romance novel, set in one of those not England, not Middle Ages fantasy world. The world building is interesting. The concept that you have a particularly patriarchal society, not really a shock. The idea that there is a much more equal and or matriarchal society on an island off to the side, that men worship the sun and women worship the twin moons, not really a shock. That the female goddesses are banned in the male-dominated kingdoms, also not really a shock. What's interesting in this is the world building is based on the idea that while magic is real and there are witches, there are the people who are known very specifically as the Embraced. That is, when there is sort of a two moons eclipse thing that happens once a year, where sort of the moons cross paths in the sky so that for a brief moment they are in one spot together. When that happens, any child born on that night is born with magical powers. And those magical powers are kind of like X-Men mutant type superpowers. So the guy with no shirt on the cover here, the so-called Beast, has the ability to absorb lightning and then basically electrocute people. And what's particularly interesting about this, of course, is that he has no real control over it. Like, apparently if he, hides in the basement, lightning will just go through the building to get to him. So he, basically has to go outside in storms so as not to destroy stuff. And he can't touch people, and the romance thing reaches its culmination when he discovers that the young woman who has been forcibly engaged to him her mother was struck by lightning when her mother was pregnant, and so she's immune to his lightning powers because magic works as a matter of metaphor logic rather than scientific logic. And if you don't have the ability to shift your thinking to magical thinking, then you will exist in a state, as a good friend of mine does, where she cannot functionally understand magic logic, which is fair, because magic logic is, as I said, the logic of metaphor rather than the logic of science, which is different stuff. But anyways, so that bit of world building is interesting, but the plot in this is the tropiest of tropes. It's super pulpy, and you have these 5 young women who each of the books is going to be about one of them, who grow up effectively as sisters in a nunnery on the island of the moons, and which is not Scotland, and that not exclamation point Scotland thing. It's this is totally not Scotland. We're doing our best to write as though everybody has a Scottish accent, but it's totally not Scotland. Anyways, So Luciana, the heroine of this novel, one morning is shocked to find out that her father is actually a duke of one of these 5 countries, and that he had separated her and her twin sister because twins born on the day of the embraced are considered, embraced are illegal on the islands and considered to be evil and dangerous and should be killed, but, twins born on that day are considered to be, double evil and double need to be killed. So he and his wife basically split their daughters up, and they kept one, Tatiana, and sent Luciana to this island because that way their, daughters would be fine. Anyway, so she finds out that they had sent her away, and her mother was supposed to go with her, but her mother died and wasn't able to go with her and stuff. So Luciana, finds out that her father basically has to marry his daughter off to a nobleman who is known as, quote, the Beast, unquote. He is called that because he's the guy on the cover who gets hit by lightning a lot, and through various events has developed a really, really fearsome reputation because people are awful. Because they decide that because he absorbs lightning and cannot help when it discharges into people, kind of like when you get a static electric buildup and you, touch somebody else and they get hit by static electricity, and it's you didn't mean to do that, it just happened. His powers are kind of like that, and, so his nurse got killed and his mother got killed and all kinds, a bunch of people got killed just by touching him, so they've decided that he is, a horrible person because when someone else touches him, they die, even if he's trying desperately to fend them off, or because he was an unconscious 5-year-old and his powers discharged into his poor nurse. People are awful. Anyways, so in the due course of events, she meets him, discovers he is not in fact a horrible person, and they have the usual meet, not cute thing where she doesn't want to marry a complete stranger but is doing this because otherwise the king, who is a very bad man, will have her father killed. So she's basically doing this to save a life. And in the meantime, Mr. Beast, whose name Leo, that's it, Leo, is basically just trying to keep living because the king keeps trying to have him killed. Again, king, bad man. So they have their various adventures, and they fall in love on the way, and she apparently she was raised by nuns, but apparently the nuns have made sure that she and her sisters know nothing whatsoever, and by sisters I mean the other young women who grew up at the convent, all of them together, and it turns out they're all princesses, which is, again, tropey, trope. So they haven't told them anything about sex, so you get these fascinating scenes in this book of her going, oh my god, I touched his pants and there was something hard in it, and it was moving, my god, what is that? And her twin sister, who has been, illicitly sleeping with the captain of the guard before she unfortunately died of poisoning. Tatiana's ghost has been following her everywhere. Luciana has the secret superpower of seeing the dead. So her twin sister's ghost has been following her everywhere, and her twin sister's ghost starts just cackling at her expense because she's like, oh my god, look at you. Oh my god, there's something in his pants. And that's one of the big weird things about these books. You look at this cover. This is a very, very standard cover for a paranormal romance, adult woman romance book. But the writing is very, very YA novel. But for the sex scenes, which are, frankly, they feel somewhat awkward to read, because of the YA feel of these books. It's weird. I find myself sometimes wondering who these books are really meant for, because, you look at this cover, but the content feels so very much like it's aimed at teenage girls. It's fine. It's ridiculous, and it's tropey, and it's pulpy, and I have a good time reading these. I don't think they're very well written. I think the number of times that a pseudo-French, not French pirate guy thinking, well, that's a different book, but, like, the repeated use of turns of phrase like, oh crap, in books that are set in pseudo-medieval whatever, it feels very weird. It feels like a teenaged interjection into a book that is trying to take itself seriously, and it just adds to the entertainment factor in these. So, I want to be very, very clear. This is not the kind of book that I say you should read if you're expecting great writing. This is not the kind of book you should read if you think it's going to be great romance. This is the kind of book that you read when you feel like reading something silly and fun and pulpy and that should not be taken seriously. And I will be doing 4 out of the 5 books of the series, most likely, because one of the books in the middle is not available from my local library, and I'm not actually going to buy these. But I had a good time. So, yeah, you know, the girl who can see dead people falls in love with the guy who keeps getting hit by lightning, and, they fall in love, they kibitz around a while, they have some dramatic sex scenes, slightly awkward dramatic sex scenes, and then, like, the king is murdered, and because the king's heir had been murdered earlier, Leo abruptly becomes the next guy in line for the throne, and abruptly is the king. And the book basically ends with Luciana contacting her sisters back on the island and telling them, hey, I'm okay, I am now queen. So there's that. It's entertaining. It's just entertaining. It's not really much else. But if you're somebody who likes high fantasy that isn't trying real hard to stick with the high fantasy feel, and who enjoys sometimes overwrought hysterics and painfully naive young women and superpowers, this could be fun. Again, the main thing to keep in mind about this is what you're looking for with this book is fun. Do not look for anything else, and if you're not finding fun, then just put it down and walk away, because you're not going to get anything else out of it. There's probably way better erotica you could track down if that's what you're looking for. So I think I've said all I'm going to say about How to Tame a Beast in 7 Days, and I will see you all next week.